3 or 2? Because you have to turn. I mean, yeah, but concrete one. Yeah. There's 12 slides. 12. I don't know. I agree for each. The last one is on Renata. It's online.
Yeah.
Oh, you did say hello. But you will. No, I think it's not here.
Does anybody see my email? I'll say telling you about the link for the.
No, what is the link? No.
So I sent an email.
Oh, we gave up on the air conditioner.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll send it again.
You're doing products and the infographics. Or should I do? Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, one day on the side of doesn't matter if you have it on me or it's hard to.
Okay, I'll send it again. So you should get a link. It's either to a YouTube page or to a Google Hangouts page. So I'll send it to Irene. So she's already there now, and she can comment by chat. I'll be monitoring. Please don't stream the video yourselves because otherwise that will work. So now it's recording. It'll go online when we're done. I'll just save it on the YouTube channel so you can watch it. I'll edit it so it's not.
I did some weird things. If you say anything weird, you edit it.
I can edit it, yes. I'll cut. So, okay, so the idea this morning is for each one of the groups to present their final results up to now. Let's try to aim for about 15-minute presentations and another 15-minute Q&A, and then we should be able to get all three groups this morning. Okay? And guys, I'm recording via the the computer. So if you talk, everything will be recorded, and you won't be able to hear what you're saying. So if you don't mind allowing them the.
Yeah, just did you say attention?
Yes.
Okay, slide.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are the Performance Self-Assessment for Think Tanks team. So the acronym is SAT. And this first slide, it shows two things. This was what we first had in mind when we started this project. We wanted to make use of this chance to look at our own organizations and reflect on our strengths and weaknesses. That's why performance self-assessment. And this other quote is about a later discussion that we had on the sustainability aspect, how we can make this more than a one-time exercise and whether it's useful or not. So we came to the conclusion that we should only repeat if we realized it was useful, because that's how things make sense. Where is the so our general objective for this project was to learn about performance self-assessment. Then we had some specific objectives. Was one, to analyze inexpensive tools that can enhance knowledge about organizations' performance and capacity. And the second specific objective we had was to design and pilot a tool that is new and applicable to think tanks. So we did that. And our first idea of what would be the contribution, this is what it stated in our proposal, that our contribution should provide think tanks with a problem-oriented review of existing performance self-assessment tools. Methodology. First, we tried to figure out the scope of Inspire. We had many dimensions that we thought would be interesting to analyze, but we had to be realistic and see what was feasible or not. So we decided on these four dimensions, so knowledge management, strategic direction, quality control, and governance. And the criteria employed was the comparability among the think tanks, our own capacity constraints, the usefulness of using such a thing, and sustainability, the possibility of repeating this exercise.
So in terms of, if we continue on the methodology, we use both primary and secondary data collection methods. In terms of primary data, we created standardized surveys and put them on an online web platform, Survey Usable, into languages, English and Spanish, and distributed the link to the organization, staff of our organization. To complement the data collected through the surveys, we also conducted desk research, which mainly included studying the website of our organizations and the organizational documents, mostly legal documents, as well as the strategic documents, etc. And conducting the interviews with the top management, mostly executive directors and deputies. As a result, individual case studies for each of our organization was developed, and later on it was peer reviewed by each of us. We gave feedback to each other. Also, we used external review for each case study. It included reviews given by the organizers as well as an external editor. At the same time, we did in-person discussion and received feedback and thus revised the case studies again. As an ultimate output, synthesis report is prepared that also includes the best practices for each organization. So as the products are as follows. So 5 case studies, 1 for each of our organization. Blog posts that we've been posting on the OpenText Exchange all throughout the project implementation period. synthesis report that highlights the main findings, areas for improvement, as well as the best practices for organization, and infographics to visualize the results of the report.
So this is one infographic that we produced. It basically summarizes all the dimensions that can be analyzed when you're doing a self-assessment. This was generated after reviewing literature and also finding different tools used by donors and organizations to assess how they are performing. But as Irina mentioned, we decided to focus on 4 of the dimensions, but we still have this menu of options if we want to continue or expand our efforts to continue self-assessment. This other graphic we have, this other image, basically presents some of the advantages or benefits of doing a performance self-assessment. So basically, it's good to identify areas of improvement in our organizations. It helps to highlight best practices. It promotes inter-area learning when you share some of the results and find that, for instance, we were assessing quality control, knowledge management. So areas that are in charge of quality control and knowledge management learn from each other the things that they're doing good. It helps track progress if you keep doing it on a permanent basis, and it helps to start a conversation on change and the change that is needed in our organizations. So here this slide basically summarizes the main findings we had on when we compared some of our case studies. Most staff members have an awareness of the vision and mission and the values of the organization, and they indicated that these were relevant for their daily activities. However, we can identify a gap of information between senior and junior staff, especially regarding processes and procedures. And this is related to the next point that highlights how internal communication is an area of improvement for all the organizations. So there are a lot of things we can do in our organizations to communicate better and overcome this gap. We have also identified that there is a lack of structured monitoring efforts for the strategic plans in the organizations that were assessed. And we think that knowledge management and strategic planning and related with communications are the most challenging dimensions. In our efforts, we also, as I mentioned, identify best practices. So each one of the organizations has been developing a summary or a short text about the best practices that they have identified in the dimensions we worked on. So BIPA is presenting the strategic management framework. EPRC, the International Advisory Board, CADEP, the outcome mapping methodology for strategic planning process, SEBRI, the knowledge management and digital filing system, and COFARO, the project approval committee. So we will have these included in the synthesis report we're preparing, so that people can also check them and see if there's something interesting for them to learn. And finally, we have presented in this small table both areas for improvement and best practices. It didn't make a lot of sense for our organizations to compare to each other in each one of the dimensions we analyzed, but it made more sense to identify areas of improvement and best practices and see if in any of those we could learn from each other. So for Budapest Institute, strategic direction is an area of improvement and knowledge management is a best practice. For CADEP, best practice in strategic direction and areas of improvement in knowledge management and quality control. 70 area of improvement in strategic direction and best practice in knowledge management, and for EPRC, best practice in the governance bodies and area of improvement in knowledge management, and Grupo Faro, 2 areas of improvement in strategic direction and knowledge management, and a best practice in governance bodies. Of course, this is not absolute. We have some things that are best practices in each one of the dimensions, and we can still have areas of improvement on those dimensions.
Okay, so
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt just to understand better what you said in the previous slide about a governance bodies?
Mhm.
Can you give me an example what you said the Budapest Institute is the best practice on that? Can you give me the example how this is structured just to understand and to compare? Sorry, because I know you all know, but since I'm here, just to understand what you were saying.
Okay, I'm sure that actually what we analyze here is what kind of decision-making bodies you have in this institute.
Don't worry, it's on the way stuff.
What kind of decision-making bodies we have, what is the division of labor between these bodies, how efficiently they work, so how far they really efficiently support the daily operations. And in our case, actually, we don't have so many bodies. Maybe this is one of the advantages we have. We have a partner body, which is sort of mixture of supervisory and non-advisory body. They meet up every second half, licensure, so every year. And we run a website, strategic planning, strategic analysis session. And basically we decide the basic strategic directions and we make basic strategic decisions there. And otherwise we have a basically sort of executive committee composed of senior researchers who are really there for a longer time and running all the projects. And it is a weekly, they have a weekly meeting and this is a sort of overview.
Are they permanent staff or they
Yes,
are
all
from
of them are permanent, only, I mean, we have 4 partners and basically one of them, one of my partners is not, he's not employed and one of the partners is only not employed. So basically all the partners have some distance. And then we thought that the kind of regulatory framework that we have, all these bodies of communicating with each other, have settled, seem to be very supportive.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't have.
Thank you, sure.
Okay. So another important stage of our process now, our project, had to do with identifying how this tool could be sustainable for our organization. What issues or what other actions could be added, what need to be improved, etc. So what we found was that the tool, as it was designed by us, need to be adapted to each organization in terms of different aspects. You know, the people who answer, the type of questions you are making, etc. So another issue related to adaptation of the tool is how many dimensions or what are the dimensions you want to include in this assessment. You might be more interested in doing human resources than governance body, for instance. Then we saw that the tool is more powerful if you include a sort of group discussions. It could be, you can do it in a very participatory way with the whole staff or with some key stakeholders within the staff in order to give you the possibility to reflect on the answers and what emerged from the survey. If possible, and if needed, you could include an external perspective in order to bring some objective or neutral view to the process and the areas of improvement and best practices. And then, of course, you should adapt the tool. All these previous bullets have to do with adapting the tool to make it more sustainable in the future. So this slide has to do not directly with the tool, but with one of the goals of the exchange initiative, related to collaboration among think tanks and more of the researchers that are working in these projects. So what we found in terms of collaboration experience, we analyzed our process by doing this SWOT analysis. We found that the strengths of our collaboration process has to do with different things. One of them was, as we are 5, we decided to implement a kind of presidency scheme, and in each month, one of us has the responsibility to promote, to encourage work, to remember deadlines, remember tasks, and whatever. That was very useful to organize our work. We also think that working with good professionals, that is not only that has smart ideas, but also are committed with work, is very important, and is very useful to inspire discussions, bring new ideas, etc. Trying to identify best practices was a very good way to understand more of our organizations. And of course, when we were doing this project, we tried to understand more of the context, the political, institutional, and cultural context of our think tanks. In terms of weaknesses, we undertook this project that in a way was a sort of comparative approach. We found that our professional expertise were very heterogeneous, and that's why we need to concentrate in some organizational issues that are transversal for all our think tanks and daily work. Was hard to engage with other colleagues beyond our institutes. Not beyond, sorry, from our think tanks. We need to remember them about the survey many times, and that was a challenge. Okay, the selection of the countries was a sort of ad hoc decision that let us focus on organizational issues, and it has to do mainly with our provenience. Now we work mainly with our think tanks in our countries. In terms of opportunity, we saw some potential in including some external stakeholders assessment. That's what I was saying before in terms of adapting the tool. And complement this process approach with kind of external audit among the think tanks. In terms of threats,
can you clarify the external audit?
sorry, sir?
Can you clarify what you mean by external audits? You mean studying each other's think tanks?
Yeah.
Like external audit, you mean
By external stakeholders?
external audit?
External audit?
It's like acting each one of us as an external audit of the other organization.
Peer review. So,
Yes.
yes, bring a more external perspective.
Yeah, we did the peer review for the documents, the case studies, but this would be more like in person going and seeing things and interviewing people. Yes.
And in terms of threats, we found that if you don't complement this exercise with some sort of face-to-face meeting or face-to-face exchange, it is difficult to work in this long-term project. That's all in terms of collaboration. Okay, so thank you, obrigado, gracias.
Yes, yes. If you have any questions, this is the time.
Yeah, just really with regards to the previous slide, I'm curious to hear your opinions about the whole experience. If I were to compare, for example, I would present to you an opportunity to do something like what you just did, and an opportunity to do, say, the same funding, to do a more traditional research collaboration that's thematically oriented, where you find a peer that's working on issues where you can actually link up with the topic itself, and where you would be, engaging perhaps long distance or maybe even go to the institution. But that would be, thematic research oriented, and you wouldn't have this component that was more, let's say, exploratory in nature with regards to the topic, and also with regards to entering into organizational development issues as opposed to traditional research issues. So you have those two options. How would you compare them? Benefits, and also in terms of, do they allow different opportunities for the institutions as opposed to you as individuals? I mean, they differ in that regard. So,
Yeah, come back to your question. Why do you think we should compare these cases?
why shouldn't you?
What do you expect by comparing?
I just want to learn, and I just want to see how do you compare. It's just an interesting thing.
Well, I think it is difficult for us to say because we haven't had the other kind of collaboration yet.
So that's not something that happens in institutions. You don't.
No, yeah, but through this experience, I meant, having throughout think tanks.
No, but I think
if
you
you
want
want
to
to compare with the more traditional policy
Yeah.
operation.
Because I'm assuming that, your centers would have at some
Yes.
point, talk to a researcher
Yes,
elsewhere.
yes.
Let's do a project on, say, economic policy or whatever.
I think that both give you learning opportunities and both give you the opportunity to make strong relationships, but it depends on how each one works. Usually the policy ones, you get maybe to meet once at the beginning and once at the end, and then you do a lot of virtual conversation, and that can be difficult for making strong relationships and following up on work. Depending on how committed each part is, it is difficult to keep up and to have the collaboration be successful. And I think that kind of collaboration also takes away a lot of opportunities of learning more about the whole organization and even the context of the country and the think tank, other than what you are studying. I mean, if you're studying like extractive industries, you will learn a lot about extractive industries in the country of the other think tank, but not much more. In this kind of collaboration, I think first, meeting more regularly has helped us become closer and track work in an easier way. And also it has given us the opportunity to learn a lot about how things are done in other think tanks and what we can learn about this dimension or another one, or even then have the trust or confidence to be able to ask a question about something that is not related to a project, but how do you guys go about solving this problem, or do you have an idea or a suggestion for this issue that I'm having? in terms of organizational capacity. So maybe the policy ones give opportunities for strengthening policy-related capacities, research capacities, and stuff like that. But the other ones are more like integral, or they give you a broader perspective. At least I think, like when you're collaborating on a policy issue, you get to learn about the other person's institution. But you know, this is like a side effect. And here it was actually, we were really concerned about understanding each other's organizations. Like it was more explicit. It was in the surface of our exercise. And but on the other hand, if you're doing policy issue, it might get more attention from the organization. One thing that we found in our common findings was that it was hard to share ownership of this project among our organizations, because this is not our business. You see, like for instance, here we're international relations think tank. We're not. Our main concern is not organizational issues.
Yes.
You see. So it's harder to sell the idea inside the organization, I guess, but it's not impossible.
And that's a point that I'm interested in, because I'm thinking that would be the same case for our research-only collaboration. I mean, you wouldn't be able to, whatever you learn from that, to bring it back to your institution and somehow spread it widely. Or would you?
I wanted to add that when you mentioned which one contributes to you personally and which one to the organization, and this one contributes both individually as well as you then spread out your knowledge to the organization, while the policy collaborations mostly increase your own capacity in terms of knowledge of the issue, and then it becomes a publication that no one might be in their organization.
And I think it also depends on how when you start to see useful things that you're learning from the collaboration, it is easier to bring them back to the think tank and share them with everybody, or the specific person that can learn about that. Because of course, none of us is in charge of like organizational issues in general. So we may be able to take something, but try to share it with the person that is dealing with M&E issues, for instance. So you have to make an effort to involve others and share what we're doing here and how we can learn here. But when you find the useful things, you are eager to take them back and share with others. Like, oh, I learned how these things
Sorry.
No, go ahead, explain.
It's difficult for me to compare this project with this project, but what I think it's characteristic of this process is that we have explicit interest in collaboration and work out issues of a large group. And it's something that is not always when you work in a consortium. I have been part of many projects with other organizations, and I always feel governance is not governance bodies. I mean the governance of the project. It's a real challenge, because you always see one organization that is not so committed or just want to take the credit, and you don't find mechanisms to go through that. And one point of this project was that we were worried about that from the very beginning. So this is something that
and maybe because it was not policy, I mean, we had zero competition among us. We were really collaborative. And we had a feeling that we were all learning, like we all had the opportunity to learn and to bring what we know of. I think we at least in our group, we forced a collaboration around the policy issues. We would have really disparities between the knowledge around this issue and this other issue between things and people.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, you have a question?
I have a comment to make on the basically external audit. Given that think tanks are really small, so it's a small scene. I think that that's possible only with think tanks from neighboring countries or those who do not compete on the same market. Because that's also one of the problems about sharing in Intel. You have very few organizations in the same country, and it's really problematic because in a way they're your competition for projects. So I think that's really important. And given the different realities, I think it's important to take into consideration, and that actually begs a regional collaboration because that will allow for such collaboration at such level. My question to you is, what's the price tag, and can it be integrated in the regular project? It can be integrated in the charge that the organizations do with their projects.
You mean cross financing?
If you were a consultancy,
Because
if you were a consultancy group, no, wait a second. If you were a consultancy group, and some of you actually operate partially as such, what you do, you issue your final price, and that's what you charge the client, and then it's your business what you do in the black box. So how much of that you share with partners, profit, how much you return back in, or what we call R&D, and so on. So this is classical R&D. So if you look at that, my question is self-assessment and so on. Does it stand? Let me rephrase a bit the question. Does it stand through the project in the consultancy?
Yeah, I think you're talking about what they developed as a standalone product, almost, or as a.
Yeah, because if you have a donor like TTI or TTF, and they say our mission is in development, actually you pitch this and you will be better, brighter, more effective. No. Actually, you don't need to imagine, environments do not have that. So if you have such a product, you have to integrate it into the regular operation.
I think you could try to tie it to policy projects, like designing the project, or you have a project in which you are collaborating with a set of think tanks and you have to meet regularly and work with them for a policy issue. You could find like tools or spaces in which you could create an opportunity for learning about organizational issues while you are doing that. I think it would be really difficult because all your attention and products are policy products, and all your concentration would be on the policy. But you could be able to learn a little bit. I think you can clear a large time and thinking about these organizational issues that otherwise would be on the back of our minds, but we won't necessarily bring into the conversation if we're sitting and talking about a policy issue in which we are collaborating.
I think you can do that technically. Certainly you can put it into the overhead of all the project, but it would be a broader sense of overhead. But my problem would be that at the scale we are 17, our overhead is quite high because we are small. I mean, just running growth is just having to solve problem about it. It's about 10%. And then still, I'm not talking about the general management costs. We still also have, I'm not talking about any solid profits we might have, or even return in which translate from for their investments or anything. So I see there by that solution, in the case of small think tanks, the risk that we could skyrocket your overhead. I'm sure in all the cases we could push it above 25%, which is high. Which is really high. And I please introduce such a law to me who's taking overhead over 25%.
We designed this, we were not thinking about project, tool for project, more for organizational assessment. So I think the challenge is to embed this in the organizational culture Yeah, the way to fund this would be through overhead. But it's ideal where each Finland want to have someone worried about or in a position for monitoring and evaluation, and that person would be in charge of promoting this kind of processes. Governance body themselves will take care of assessing their own performance. So
We have like voluntary camps.
right, it's time consuming. You need to put money to that.
Sorry to continue, this is just really interesting, and I hope you don't feel like we're trying to.
It's not the Spanish Inquisition over here, because we're curious to learn.
No, yes, we didn't plan. This is community or something. It's just really out of.
Let's do.
No, look, we make our funding decisions, and actually we're unusual compared to the rest of the field. And if you think about that, a lot of donors think like, okay, what's the price tag? And you say, okay, I convince you if I do the self-evaluation, it's a brilliant product, I have to spend time and then I will be better. And the next question will be, okay, how better would you be and what is that you will be better? And then the ultimate question is, what's the price tag of that and where it will come funded? Now, when we're in the non-profit world, we always think about the next project and donors give it to you. If you just move into the profit world, nobody cares. You're a black box. You can actually, consultancies charge obnoxious amount of money for the same type of product that you charge nothing.
Yes.
It's true. And you have to, I'm just exploring this because that actually, it's not about changing your minds. It's not, you have a very interesting presentation, you found many different things. But it's basically also how to think and what are the key messages towards donors to say, wait a second, or towards the government, or towards policy decision makers that eventually hold the key of the market that they offer.
Correct. You can. I know Fido's case. I know Fido has. You carried out surveys. You contracted consultants to help out with staff performance surveys as well. So they are putting money into these processes. The question is whether this tool might be a substitute for that consultant-led review process, which could be run by yourselves with the support of another think tank. Would that be cheaper and more effective? If it is, then you're into something. You could develop something that could be shared among think tanks. Otherwise, then go to the consultancy firm. We keep buying the services from them. Because most think tanks, as Leandro says, I think, are starting to incorporate these processes into their own planning cycles and processes. So they're struggling to find funds for it. Do you offer something that is more cost effective?
Yeah, and the thing is, if you, like, for Grupo Faro, we have separate funds to hire consultants and do an evaluation, for instance. But when you hire the consultants, they don't necessarily know about the think tank world or even the non-profit world, and they are not really necessarily able to tell you, well, you have an area of improvement in knowledge management. There's a think tank in Brazil that has these
Or it
great
takes so much time for them to get to know the think tank business that it's not time effective anymore. So
I have two recommendations for
You let me. Okay. Thank you. I was beginning to forget.
And for you,
But I think it comes back to,
I will forget now.
you have forgotten.
Sorry.
I don't dare interrupt.
No, it's just on the role that in this project there was a management of the collaboration, right? Stephen and Enrique, they designed the collaboration. There were certain components. There was this orientation that brought you together and with certain objectives and the process in place. I was wondering about your views on the need or lack of that role in a perhaps more traditional collaboration. I'm thinking in Latin America, the FinTech Initiative has done these calls for projects that involve collaboration with other institutions. I was wondering, based on this experience, do you think they're having someone structure the collaboration in those cases something that's important, that's needed? I know collaborations happen in many ways, sometimes easier than others. But that role of bringing the actors together and putting the structure there, I just want to hear your views on that, thinking of perhaps other projects that are not as particular as this one, but that involve collaboration. Perhaps there's a need to manage that collaboration to make it more productive.
In all collaborations, there's usually a leading organization when we're talking about policy issues. And in this case, their role was quite important, especially at the beginning of the project, for shaping us and giving us the direction. And then on a biannual basis, we were monitoring, providing the progress reports, and that helped us be more organized to use the direction of the program.
And thinking about the matching funds that PTI has and which collaboration has been promoted, I think it's in some ways similar because you have these, I guess, people have already made the connections and the personal relationships in other spaces, and you already identify that you get along with this person from Paraguay, and you think that you have had a conversation of a topic in which both care, and you decide that you can work on that. But the other think tanks gave us the opportunity to widen that network, because otherwise we would have still worked like with the same think tanks in the area in which we coincide in the CTI meetings, and we have already conversations, or we know, and that leaves a lot of other think tanks that are in the world doing similar things, or from which we can learn.
You don't just say.
Petra, you had something? Oh, sorry, Leandro, you wanna add to that?
I have recommendations.
Okay, so maybe Leandro.
No, yeah, maybe it's where I would say it's not a recommendation, but I see what Stephen and Enrique done with our project is very similar to what I would expect from donors working. If you promote matching funds with Faro and Ani and BFF, maybe that would be your role, just to encourage us, give you some guidance. Then how are your products? What are you needing?
In a sense, it happens already. When you have like someone, I think a team that is on performance, and that is eager also to help you sometimes and review your drafts and
Much
yeah.
understand we provide much feedback in that
Yeah.
recommendations
Yeah.
products that you produce on
Yeah.
the supervision.
Maybe if you are thinking about the policy issue, it's be harder because the manager, the donor, maybe needs to be like a specialist or whatever. But this kind of project, both Enrique and insights.
So for me, one of the most inspiring moments during all this project, and basically this week also goes when analyzing the case studies and then each other's cases, and then we sit together and we kind of putting one of the case studies in the forms and then shutting questions to the guy who was preparing it. So basically this was about moving beyond the story written on paper, but also understanding why these other institutions is doing this for them. Because idea. So if I were a donor, and I know that ETF is doing a lot of systematic workshopping about city building, just workshops are are good, but instead, that they don't provide this chance of having very proactive discussions without the moderator, without the guide. Right? They are too disciplined in a sense. And then second, basically they are one shot once at a time, and they don't have any kind of factors. So my recommendation would be nice, I think, for example, to set up a matching fund or something like open fund, and then invite think tanks to come in pairs, like in training, with the self-appointed good practices, and then they can, examine each other, exchange with each other, they can visit each other if it's necessary, because there might be some tools which is good to see on the spot how this works, how it's not. And then kind of training project for 1 year or for half year, and then they can get self-appointed with what kind of focus regarding organizational development and exchange. And I think this kind of activities might not really produce tangible results in the short term, but I'm pretty sure that we might really give the opportunity to all of these organizations to get a broader view about, like, okay, this is a problem not just I am struggling with it, but the others. Yeah. And maybe the others are advanced in this respect, but in another dimension, I am more advanced with them. And I think giving the chance also to training by themselves gives you also a lot of, release you also a lot of burden that is not by force, but this is by manipulation that they come up.
I would just add to that, these meetings with organized with TTF. They're also very big groups, more than 14 think tanks. When it's something, even though actually one of the meetings that I participated in did result in a collaborative project with the Estonian practice, but they were like more than 45 think tanks, and I think I didn't get to know enough during this debate.
And one thing I also think is that there is no, at least not that I'm aware, such a thing as a think tank school. Something you learn by doing, actually, and you can learn a lot by seeing other think tanks. So I think that's one of the values of this type of projects, that there were many lessons about working a think tank, and some aspects of managing think tanks, and relations with stakeholders, a lot of things that you could easily put into like an MBA of think tanks or something.
Don't give credit to it will just increase Kike's dreams.
It's trapped already.
Don't give him. He will quote you. You will get quoted in the inaugural document.
We were expecting that he would hire us for the self-assessment.
Hold a little bit of a donor thinking, because I think it will be revealing for you to at least to tell you what donors, how donors think, and what they have in mind. Because I think it's important that you're aware. Because I think we're in a different mind frame, and again, it's not by nature, because some people who work for donors actually work for think tanks, and there is some fluctuation between the fields. It's a bit by mission in a way. So one very specific response to actually your colleague, your partner Balázs is speaking at our event with the think tank directors in Sarajevo. So it's a group of 30 people. Actually, I will have a lot of enemies in the Balkans, because there were like 70 applicants, and we said no, the 30 most motivated will come, exactly because we don't have to have a huge group. And it will be like a big couch of a help group for the think tank directors, because in principle they don't have a chance to talk to their peers. And again, applying the same logic that when you get people from the region, they can tell to each other what they can tell to their competition back at home. But I not only that I hear you, I agree with you that one-off event or event like that without structural support. Now, there are two things that I want to share about how donors think in this respect. I mean, first of all, you have to understand that think tanks are a very small niche area. and there's super few donors that have even that have specialized. Even if you look at the broader field of policy research, it's actually a very funny field. Funny in a sense that even donors who support it, they have aspiration to influence policies. Most of the time, they fake it by simply peddling the same university, whatever research institute stories. I'm saying this because it's really important to understand that the thinking is not through the prism of think tank. The thinking is through the prism of policy research, and not always think tanks come as the first type of organization. To my regret, because I'm part of the sect here that believes in think tanks, but I think it's important to understand that to donors they come only as a second thought, unfortunately. Now, and usually they come as a second thought in terms of some specific achievement in a programmatic area or a policy area that has to be improved. That's first point. My second point is more about the how donors usually approach a certain area. They either approach it as a field or a concept. The field, in whatever free definition, means that their mandate is to build a field of organizations or a field of a thematic area. Field of think tanks in a given country, or maybe a field of whatever, policies for sustainable environment, where the grants will be various. Now, I think that's important to understand, and also it's important to acknowledge that very few donors approach the field of only think tanks. Most of them will approach the field of civil society development, where think tanks will be one component. USAID is a probably a good example of that. The second one with the concept, I have actually trouble with, because most of the donors will come to you and they would like to do co-branded stuff, and a concept meaning like this is your mission, but this is also our mission. And why I have a problem with that is because actually there's a lot of free riding on the back of the think tanks. The donor just add their logo, and with a bit of money they say we also did that. The German foundations, political party foundations, are a prime example of this. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and the like. But I think it's important to understand that donors will think like that, and some of them, let's say in this concept set, they will be more activists, and they will say, we want to change that. And unfortunately, they will treat you as a consultant. And I think that's why sometimes it's important to move. I love the discussion. I think it's a good, it's excellent tool, but you have to contextualize it within within the donor's field rather than your. I'm not saying that you have to accept it, but you have to fight it.
Right. So any more questions, and then we moved on to the next group. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Do you guys want to, or comms? Yeah. I see some people want to go for a toilet break or coffee while I'm looking at presentations.
They talk about really practical things, how you manage research, qualities, role, research management, external governance, sustainability. This is executive directors from one region. So we bring speakers from other regions, mainly, not mainly, it's in Europe, but that's
Yeah, what trying to do is focus less on events. They try to focus activities directed to research staff, junior research staff, or even I don't know, in finance and administration staff. Get together.
Yeah.
It's something that we're thinking about. Just to have all this knowledge taken down.
We do that.
Não, eu agora gostaria de lembro, mas exatamente
Purchase, yes. then the last half.
Eu vou lá ver o que nós vamos fazer.
And then the rest is the whole
Formalizar e depois fazer isso uma semana. Isso da convidada para os dois. Isso é absolutamente decidido com o conselho. Devemos aprovar formalidade. Todo mundo já aprovou, todo mundo já pode. Isso.
Se corta. Pero la única persona mirando
So how was the yoga?
bueno, ya no.
I'm sure what it was.
Okay.
No,
Did
bueno,
you
el
swim?
mundo está mirando.
Yes, yes.
Cold.
No.
En YouTube, pero había una
It's
persona.
not for me. It's
Como que era-
There is so huge waves. And you have to keep
So but then you're next to the yoga, then the cold water, then the big waves.
Then socialize with you.
Then the
Then I socialize with you in the
Francesca was really
I socialized with you in the morning because yesterday was like a cemetery. I arrived in the bar and they were all like. Luckily, they were Japanese tourists, so they were snoring louder.
Francesca showed us how to
But
ride
it
the
was,
waves.
he was not entertaining that night. You were quiet at the bossa nova.
You'd be shouting at the stage.
Yeah, the stadium.
Yes.
Oh, what a pathetic.
So you were not cooperating with us.
Okay.
No, I tried, but I failed. You're sleeping as no, it's unfair actually. You were sleeping in the bar, but then afterwards you got energized and you fasted. With your
Okay, let's move on to the second presentation so we can
You should tell the people
Yeah.
in the application because
You weren't here.
you have to say first we're going to use you. We already did time for lunch.
No. And take a deep breath. And I realized that one of the was Francesca. Yes.
Okay, we'll start, and I think there's one viewer, which is probably Irving. Okay, let's aim for about 15-minute presentation, and then we'll go for quite a bit of Q&A.
We will do our okay, you guys start?
Yeah.
We would like to present the year-long work and findings of CS group team. We team focusing on communication strategies and they're converting among 4 participating think tanks. Unfortunately, we're not in our complete lineup here today, but we should have Ernie online. Hi, Ernie. So first, let me just go to the beginning to remind you who was participating in this in small research. Although Nadia is no longer participant on exchange, she was a substantial member, an important member of our business. She was she did a substantial job work on the final outcome that we're about to present today. And that's also why we used the picture from Quito, not the most recent picture, because this is the only picture that of us men actually is not like or 6 months. It's also very baby girl. Let's start from the objectives. Our main objective of the work that we were doing and documented we are going to present actually can divide into 2 parts. First of all, we wanted to exchange information on the way how our institutions or we in our work design communication strategies. How do we communicate certain research outcomes to different target audiences? And the second important thing that we emphasize is that we wanted to use the advantage of the fact that actually there were 4 people from 3 different continents went in our group, so we were able to really talk to people from completely different contexts and to find new inspiration, to find things that, for example, we could use in our own practice and enrich our own practice. So that was really important advantage, and it was also one of the main objectives of our small project to get some inspiration and possibly to be able to incorporate it into our own practice. To explain even more, maybe something about motivation and assumptions that we had when we entered this collaboration. Main motivation, of course, was to get our work better and to improve the things that we do, the way how we communicate our research results, how we communicate to different target audiences. Although, we really are quite different organization in terms of size, in terms of some organizational issues, or in terms of topics that we work on. We really were able to find a lot of similarities, a lot of things that we actually share, which made it more beneficial for us to compare these and to really learn. It's really important for us because there are main assumptions that we had. The learning from things from different regions, different backgrounds, really helped us to get inspiration and enriching this practice. It was also important for us that we were able to find a shared topic of interest, because at the beginning, actually it was the result of this learning batching process that we were able to illustrate it all, even though we all have some differences in the topic that we work on. There's still topics that are actually sensitive. That's the adjective that we use. These topics that are controversial for society, that are something that divides our society that we work in. And also, we were able to, or one of those main things we wanted to achieve was to be able to incorporate some new practice, something that usually we do in our everyday work, and inspiration from the things that we operate. That's for the motivation. Okay, that already presented the overview of the project. Here I want to explain a little bit the methodology we chose. It was more like an inductive process. For example, the other project were based from a model that they prepared. We aren't experts on communication. We decided to go through a more qualitative explorative study when we raise our categories from the data collection. So we focused on a self-case study approach for each institution. And as Blanca already said, it was focused on sensitive issues. We first found that we share the democracy building concern in our countries. And this was the first umbrella of the whole project. But then we were narrowing it a little bit, and we found that sensitive issue was more specific. And as Blanca already said too, it was some topics that usually debate society. So it's more a challenge to communicate that kind of results, because you have to be more careful. Usually the society puts the institution in one or other place, and you have to be think how to present things in order to, one way, move a little bit society, produce a little change, but or the other thing, not keep talking with the same people that think the same activity. So it has a much more challenge on communication. And here is
an example of the process we go through. We first come to understand our institutional framework, because without that, it would be difficult to understand the communication, the culture of communication of each institution. We go through also the communication office history, if they have, or how it's the way that communication works in each institution. We also inquiry for meanings of communication, because sometimes you have some documents with certain things that policy, strategy, but on the other hand, people that have to use the document have their own meanings, and it was really useful. We found that in all our institutions, there's some different meanings of communication and the role that communication should have in each institution, even though among researchers, and also usually to make it simple, but it's not that, but usually older people are against communication office, and younger people are more willing to get into more tools to communicate better their work. So then we do an internal mapping of research policy aim and communication activities, and we select it, we group in a common framework, and then we select the activities for in-depth analysis. So we came up with this selection of policy aims and activities. As you can see there are different topics. EFA in Peru were more related to the armed conflict and collective memory. SENA were more related to radicalism, mainstream political parties, rhetoric. CPLR were reform administrative service, and Article 33 improves transparency and accountability in managing mining. So in all these 4 topics, they were a challenge in communicate the results of this research. And we decided to, looking at what we have, we saw that we all have a policy meetings. So we decided to go through the same kind of activities to see how each organization do this. So in a comparative group of activities. And also we select each group of activities that is more interesting in each institution. So for EFA was interesting the way we managed the published Word document. I mean the different kind of presentations we made. In SENA was very interesting, the educational events, workshops, and trainings they do. And same at CPLR, and Article 33 has some innovation in social media.
As part of this project and the development methodology, as Francesca mentioned above, was for case studies. After running our organization, we choose focus area for institutional and criteria for communication office to see how we different and similarity in this area. We saw, for example, that the donor support is important to establish the communication office with full-time staff. It helps to demonstrate what communication office can do in a context where people are not sure about its importance. However, in the context, it's important to consider how to maintain the communications office after and when such support will finish. And we do understand that having a communication strategy and policy is important things to have more clear vision of what we want from communication activities and in which way we can achieve our communication goals. After learning of our organizations, we can see that it's easier to implement strategy and policies when organization has communication office with full-time staff that will be responsible for this role. Another important thing is that organization need to have key performance indicators for communication activities. And the question is how to evaluate our communication and how impact with our communication activities. It's important to understanding are we on the right way with our communication or not. In the beginning, the comparison of our four think tanks from four different countries and regions seem to be very differentiated task. However, the resulting synthesis shows that the differences are much less extensive as expected. We clearly understand that the policy aim, the justification and context are absolutely different because of different country situation, backgrounds, and because of different organization profiles. Nevertheless, in the result, we can see that the target groups, as well as certain activities that are chosen to communicate the message to the target groups, share many similarities, and studying them in different contexts may be very enriching and inspiring for our own practices.
So we want here to reflect on the tool or learning by doing, how we rephrase this kind of designing on the go approach. We believe that it allows to adapt the question and instruments to the particularity of think tank institutions. Because we were like all the time trying to understand and not trying to evaluate institutions. And that approach helped to that view. It showed the complexity of the institutions, and not only the written documents, but more the day-to-day decisions, because we interviewed the people who was responsible for the communication, and also director, and also researchers. So there are three different kinds of view and decisions making in terms of communication. Also, this kind of process helps us to collaborate a lot. We have to interact, we have to make decisions all the time. It's not that we divided the work and do it by ourselves. We have to have frequently meetings, and that helps a lot to know each other and to know better each context and to know better the institutions we were trying to understand. I think in this framework, face-to-face meetings were extremely important because we solved main problems or main decisions were made on the face-to-face meetings. Even though we were having a lot of conference calls, the face-to-face meetings were like the most important tool to make decisions. However, it's very time-consuming. It was a lot of time. I think we worked the time, but it's going to be maybe difficult to do in a larger group also. But we believe it was useful.
on the collaboration process itself, we divided into six categories to make sure that we were facing and also to relate what we were trying to accomplish. We know the challenges, of course, we're a group of people who never met before, we were from different countries, different language that we so this first obvious challenge that of course we were facing, and also in relation to the fact that we all live in completely different time zone. So also the time that we actually could make the conference call to communicate each other was really limited. So it was always the 2 p.m. for me, 7 p.m. for Francesca, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. for Ernie. So it could be difficult sometimes. Actually, like we were, it was 1 year long process when we were trying to design such a work or such a methodology of work that we that it was really time consuming because we really were focusing mainly on the discussions, if possible face-to-face discussions, or to making decisions, unanimous decisions with each other, so which also helped us to be on the same line all the time. Second big challenge was were changes that were made in our project team during the year of cooperation. We lost Nadia. She was replaced by Nicola, which was done actually in final phase of the project. So that was really difficult to change and also to include Nicola in the project on such a late stage of like it was quite successful. In the beginning, we also welcomed Ernie to the project after it was already it was not started, but it was already in.
You had an idea. You had an idea.
And there was bad guy who was part of the project from the beginning. Also, we didn't continue cooperation. So it was things that also caused some delays, and also this time because we had to involve the people and explain the methodology of our objectives and motivation of the game. I think that we were quite successful in doing this. The central focus of the study, it's what Francesca already mentioned it a little bit. It was something to do with this interactive method that we decided to use. So, like, we didn't know each other. We were working in totally different contexts. So, actually, we from the beginning we wanted to take some inspiration to actually make an action, which was not possible because of the time constraints. Because we find out that we learn more about not just this communication action that we were currently, but also about the context, about the context of the country that we work in. So it also took us more time, but I think it was more beneficial from the outcome because we were able to really understand each other much better. Changing the methodology and systematization, it was also something that Francisco already mentioned. It really cost us some time to adjust the methodology, to adjust the way how we were systematizing our work. So how we decided to group our activities that we were working on, because really had to firstly ensure that we really are on the same level, so we really understand what level of communication strategies are we focusing on, what actually all the terms that we use mean, which is also very important to incorporate into project during the implementation, because at the same point we need to make sure that the terms that we use are actually the same, because that it was not so clear. And very important thing is the fact that as we found out, the fact that we were actually focusing on the topic that we normally work on in our research interest, and the fact that we all share this aspect of sensitivity in some way was very motivational for us also in this project. So we actually were able to connect this institutional aspect with the policy aims. So with the work that we really do, it really motivated that more to work on.
Well, we were thinking about future perspectives, about working together in that way, and all the team was really committed to the task and to the project. So we have the chance to get much more trust in each other. So we believe we could maybe continue to institutional issues, for example, internal communication. That is a really, really big issue. I think you also mentioned that. And there's really different perspective, and it's difficult to know, like, for other institutions how to communicate better internally, for example, because other institutions have other hierarchies, other kind of things. So maybe we can learn each other from that experience too. We think that maybe at this moment we can move further to policy aims, which was something that was really difficult to make before. We don't know the institutions. So we found some similar concerns like radicalism, violence. So that can be some topics that we can work through. Or also to initiate a common comparative research project. We actually, as I said also, we thought we are going to do like more international communicational activities, but the time was really short for that. But to visit each other and to know the communicational activities like in practice would be really great for complete the experience. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, I would like to ask, with regards to the end products, I imagine that for your institutions, it must be very useful information that you get from your assessments and even from the comparison. And as you said, you're not experts on the topic, but how did you find that your studies contributed to what's already out there? I'm curious because, approaching from a different perspective, maybe what you produce is actually something that wasn't there, or maybe it is there, but just adds a new perspective. So, just, the end product itself.
Well, I honestly don't know. We don't know much. We haven't done like a really literature review about the topic. We don't focus on that. So maybe it's completely new. Maybe it's not. But we did some. We did some research review, but nothing new. And what we found was more evaluating frameworks. So it's something that we don't feel comfortable on that stage, yes. But I really don't know. Maybe there's a lot of things like this.
Maybe there are the study that will be of this art project will be really like 4 case studies basically. So if we don't attempt to generalize something. It's just like really detailed insight into how to work and on this process of implementing all details and seeing back to the methodology. It was really useful, especially for us to learn about not just about themselves, like other partners, but also about ourselves. Because when we were doing these mapping things, when we were doing these case studies, we had to coordinate our system as we work, or we need to find some common features to be able to compare it. So it was also some very useful insight into our own practice. So I think that this was also important and beneficial of this approach.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I mean, again, I'm no expert on communications, but just by looking at the lack of systematic approach to communications that most think tanks that we have at the beginning of the initiative, I can imagine that that's the case for many think tanks around the world who haven't had the opportunity to be part of something like the TTI. So if that's the case, I imagine that having a study that looks at communication of sensitive political issues from a think tank's perspective might be something really, I don't know, perhaps it's very unique or possibly very useful for other think tanks that address that kind of topics, you know. So it would be interesting to share the result why the it's
Probably the specific policy issues, the sensitive issues, I mean that specific focus would be much more interesting. Maybe because what we found even in TTI meetings with communication experts, we all were in this, for example, in Paraguay. Do you remember that meeting? Were you there?
Monitoring a police organization.
No, there was one in Paraguay. Yeah, and the expert was an expert, very good one, but not in think tanks.
Yeah, that was resource policy.
So she presented a lot of examples, very interesting, but to raise money or for topics that are much more easier to sell. Those are not issues easy to set. So that's why we think the experience of each other think tanks in this kind of activities is really, really useful.
Difficulties you had in forming a team. I mean, now that it's all over, it's your presentation made it sound much simpler than it was because
I know.
And it would be interesting if you could be more frank about that. Because you had a team that had effectively a very disruptive and uncooperative member. For whatever reason, you struggled with that. You added another person from just as far away who was complete opposite, so that's a big plus. So you started with this huge minus. You add a big plus, but then of course you lost another team member at the late stage. So that's a team that had a lot more trouble, in a sense, not for any fault of its own, than the first team. So for you, I think the issues of sustaining a team and keeping yourself going over a long period were probably more important than they were for the first presentation, and a lot more important than you're very bravely letting on now. So that's point number one. The other point is that in comms, as I guess Antonio mentioned, there's a lot of specialized expertise out there. It's a huge field, not necessarily all relevant to think tanks, but there's just a giant industry of people who tell you how to do your comms. So in a sense, you're coming at it from a researcher point of view, which is good, but also you're venturing into a field where there's tons of people and tons of solutions and tons of buzzwords, and I think you knew none of them, which was a good thing, probably coming into it. But it also, I think, highlighted a weakness in the design of what we did, which was the lack of mentoring from specialists in the field. You got lots of advice at the beginning when you submitted your proposal, but not too much specialized advice thereafter. So I think you embarked on a field where you weren't experts, where there are a lot of experts, and without the benefit of having somebody who knew all the buzzwords to help you. And so I wonder how you felt about that as a weakness, because I think it probably was a weakness in this space. So 2 issues.
Well, about the first one, it really was difficult. I don't know. I think maybe the first was the difficult for me, the most difficult, because trying to work with someone that don't answer emails, or not be on the conference at the hours, or not send the small task we decided, not only was difficult because we frustrating, but we spent like, imagine we decided to meet at 7, whatever. And so we spent like half an hour waiting and starting to what? This person is not here, but what happened? He just said yes, and he confirmed yes. And yeah, it was a lot of loss of energy on that. Half an hour, and so we should start. So I don't know, we started at some time to register the time we were busy, but it was, yes, it was, I think that was the most difficult, because then when Ermi came to the group, it was what we have to explain her and everything, and yes, it takes time, because we were like, you know, we are writing and we are like 1 second third, and you will have to go back to 1. So yes, it was time consuming too, but it was not frustrating. And then when Nadia left, it was the same. It was something that, again, you have to put a little track down, but it was not frustrating, because Nicola gets very quickly the job, and he was on the conference calls and on the tasks. It wasn't that difficult on that side. I don't know if you want to add something about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we were really lucky that when those 2 changes, I think Ermi and Nicola, when they happened, like we were lucky that we had this person. They were compatible with that. It was not so frustrating to get anything. First one was probably
For me, it was a big challenge to join this team now. And sorry for if I do something wrong, you know. It was a big challenge for me to join. But it was.
Sorry?
The second issue.
Yes, about this second.
Yes, I think that in some ways it could be better and maybe easier to have somebody who dealing with this communication issue professionally, like especially in those like designing cards or maybe we could give some advice. But on the other hand, I think that it was also it was challenging, but it was in some way also quite positive to that we actually could follow our own maybe path to learn things, and maybe it's time consuming, maybe not so professional, but I think that it had also some benefits. No, we are not professional, we agree. It was professional from the researcher's point of view, yes, not from the communication advisor.
At some point, we thought we were having some. And I don't know, we lost that too, because at some point we talked about some mentoring, and then I don't know, we get into the project, and I think we forgot about it.
And also, because methodology was changing, and we were focusing maybe not only on communication issues, but also on those institutional, organizational issues. So we do this quite a lot of times.
Yes, that's true too, because the institutional description took like a a lot, but it was really important to understand the culture of communication. And that's something, really we want to understand the culture of communication. And that, I think it's something that is not from the communicational perspective. That's something maybe we add to that. And it would be great to have a communicator that gives some feedback, but we have to.
Maybe further stage.
Yes, second phase.
I have a question from Ermi through Twitter. She says, she's asking for everybody. She says she's wondering if think tanks actually need an organization-wide communication strategy, an integrated communication strategy, or by case or by project, or I guess or both. And I don't know if that's a question that remains in your analysis, but it's a question she has.
Do you want to repeat the question, please?
So whether a think tank needs to have an organization-wide communication strategy, or whether it should be by case or by project, or both, I guess.
This was one of those characters that we were encountering. Differs also from our organization, not only because of the size, but also because of the years of practice or let's say. So we have different experiences with this.
Right.
Maybe we also want to hear more. It's for cases. This is very interesting question, and also quite important
We saw that we have both actually. We have project-based communication activities and some topics that are very important for the institution. It goes also with that institutional support. But I think you need both, probably.
Gordon, any questions from you?
No, because I try not to turn like the Muppet Show with two of us on the balcony.
Any questions from
I have a lot to say and comment on communications. It's a holy grail at the moment, but few manage to get it.
I have a question. I wonder, this is a process for you, but Zai might be one of those people brought in by the TTI, the funders, to talk about communications to think tanks. But I always found it much more interesting and much more engaging when the organizations or the people we were talking to had done some work themselves and had started the process of inquiry about communications in their own organizations, because then at least they had lots of questions to ask rather than blank sheet or just see what you have to say. So it was a much more challenging task as a consultant coming in, and much more interesting when the organizations we were working with had started that process of inquiry and analysis of what it meant to do communications as a think tank. And I wonder if at the end of this process you feel you probably would be able to demand more from a communications consultant or advisor, and whether you have a set of questions that you would want to ask them that you maybe didn't have at the beginning of the process. You're about to start a new think tank. Do you go in there with questions about communications that you didn't have?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as I said, like all this experience was not just learning about others, but also learning about ourselves. So yes, I'm not looking at all these issues the way I was looking at them 1 year before, because I wasn't thinking really about all these institutional issues to such an extent. So I think that I appreciate it more now, and I think it's also an important part of our job, and more than I did before. So yes, I think it's changed my idea, and I think I can do it.
On the other side, something that we found too is that for sensitive issues, it's not only a matter of communication. You need the research perspective. And in the majority of the cases, it's the research who decides much more than the communicator, because it's a sensitive topic. So that's something that is related of what we do also. The way you present is not always a tool and innovative. So for example, in my research, it's very important how you named the process you are describing. It depends on the target. You can people that stand up and go if you say the incorrect word. So it's not only communicator, who is very important, but on these topics, I think you need like both working closely together, and that's something we learn from that. Don't fear money.
Yes, it's important lesson learned. I think that maybe like now thinking about it, we should emphasize it more. That it's quite important. Like people's like the researchers. It's like I said, it's really possible. That's an important point.
Right. Any questions? See, Vermi has one. Before I, yeah, she's been following on Twitter. And, yeah, no. Okay. All right, thank you. Still live.
Third presentation.
Yeah, it's business models.
I mean, it's
Lost the mind to a toilet break, so we'll wait a little bit. Yeah.
Is there free?
Yeah, but I don't want people there.
What do you mean?
Is it that you?
Yeah, I understand that we should move there.
Just give me, yeah, yeah. Selena and I think Antonio, and then we can start. Okay. Ready? Yeah. Okay, so the last group, business models.
Do yeah, conditioning.
Do you want to turn it off?
Yes.
Just asking, like,
Or the, yeah, well, let's, okay.
You see, you didn't do yoga class.
You failed to cleanse the impurities from your system.
I'll resolve to continue living in this impurity.
Okay. Okay. So we will talk about our project that focus on revealing the business models of think tanks. We have made substantial changes based on the feedback we have received from all of you. Were very important for us and helped us frame the analysis. So, okay, just to present the team, it's Leandro Edge, I'm Argentinian, I'm representing the think tank Cadet in Paraguay.
I'm Ari, representing Chile.
Okay. So the goals of our project have to do with describe think tank's model, but more than that, to design or test an approach to analyze think tank's business models. Also, we were very interested in understanding how business models decisions are related to contextual factors. So we made ourselves two main questions. So what are frequent business model decisions that think tanks leaders usually make, and how do decisions relate to context? And the practical output of our project is intended to provide think tanks with insights that will allow their leaders, directors, boards, whatever, to shape their organization's business models. So one point has some clarification has to do that the idea of business models is very it's not so easy to understand in terms of not all the think tank community understands the same by business models. Also, there are not much literature of reference for these issues, especially for think tanks. So,
This is the methods that we apply. So at first, we were reviewing the literature on business models, and we were very, the terminology itself, the business model, I think we borrow from the private sector. And I remember that there was like questions on why we use the business model, not like in the US non-profit management or governments or non-profit government something. But we finally came up with a business model in the way that this is the term that think tanks, run the business sector and organize its organization and so on. And given that there are so many dimensions, and on the other hand, we also, would like to be very comprehensive. And finally, we come up with like 8 dimensions, including leadership, governance, funding structure, and human resource, and as well as financial management, and also we will see after this slide. But I think one of the things that is important is about the selection of the case study. So we are not, have intention to represent like this is the think tanks which are representing Latin America or even South America, and also in Indonesia case this is not like typical think tanks in Indonesia because given the wide variety of think tanks. But at least what we have done regarding to the research questions is with this framework, with the 8 dimension, and then we would like to see how this 8 dimension works in 6 think tanks, regardless the origins of think tanks. But of course, the context we will try to always relate how its dimension works, how think tanks works on that, and how it responds effectively to the context. And regarding the data collection, it is qualitative research. So typically we talk to the board of the member, the founders, the executive directors, researchers, and also the like financial managers, and also the researchers. To some extent, we also talk to the former directors to see how the models changes from one period to another period. And with all of this, the products that we'd like to produce is 6 case studies, and now we're working on the synthesis paper that we try, instead of only describing like the case study paper, we would like also to come up with some reflection on the 6 case studies.
Yes. Just let me again to the one of the objectives of our project. We decided to work on this issue because we understand business model as a key issue in terms of sustainability of think tanks. So that's why we believe this is important. It's important for think tanks to reflect on how they make decisions on different issues, always taking into account their mid-term and long-term sustainability. Well, based on the literature review and the gaps we saw in those papers or analysis on think tank business models, but also of private sector models, we came out with 8 dimensions that were important for us to take into consideration when analyzing business models. And we try to define what we understand by each dimension. So for each dimension, we set some questions. So just a brief overview of the dimension. We selected value proposition, core business activities, leadership, governance, funding structure, staffing, financial management, and communications. So we intended to see or to understand how decisions on each of these organizational features contribute to or are shaped by the need for sustainability of the think tanks. So basically, one of the main questions behind our project is: do you want to be sustainable in a certain context? What do you have to do in terms of value proposition, core business activities, communications, whatever. How do these dimensions are linked to each other? So, okay, this is, we will share some preliminary findings. We don't want to be so deep at this stage, but the way we reframe our project based on our discussions or our analysis has to do that for each dimension we discover, or we saw that think tank directors and leaders in general usually do themselves a couple of questions on each of these dimensions. So when you talk about value propositions, a think tank that want to be sustainable has to ask itself, what are the features of my organizations that are different from other peers in the field. So we bringing the context in, it always is related to the context. You know, you may have a lot of competitors, or you may have a very limited market where you are the main one of the main organizations. But again, you try. We saw that think tanks are always asking themselves how to differentiate from the others in the field. So to a common question, we identify for each dimension different answers. And in some dimensions, there's a big variety of answers. So we see that dimension as a very important one in terms of you have many choices to make. And in some dimensions, we found that options or decisions are very similar. So in terms of value proposition, most of the think tanks claim that they conduct robust research, the level of presentation. Also, some of them try to differentiate from the others in terms of which is their thematic expertise, or if they are generalists. Some are pure research, some are more advocacy organizations. Also, they talk to different audiences. Some of them are more focused on policymakers and other in civil society, and this also can change in different periods for the same organization, depending again on the context and how the context behaves. So regarding the core business activities, think tank leaders usually ask themselves about what are the activities through which my think tanks will deliver this value proposition to its different stakeholders. And it's very common to see that most think tanks offer a portfolio of activities, not only research, and this can vary depending on the staff characteristics, the demand and the context, etc. But you will find from policy research to policy advice to compatibility activities and many others activities, some more innovative than others. In terms of governance, think tankers should ask themselves what is the purpose of the governance arrangement. What we want from our board, from our different governance bodies. We saw that some of them are more concentrated in sustainability of the organization, that is given a strategic direction, also worry about funding issues. But other think tanks try to want their boards to be like political vectors. So political channels to bring policymakers to the table, help them build links with the political field. Some of them are more managerial. They are worried about budget. They are worried about planning, others are worried about fundraising. So board might be aware of all these issues, or it might be more concentrated in on one of them or a couple of them. So another issue has to do who are the members of this board. Are they internal? Are they external? Or are we including or involving other research organizations, or do this board need to be from private sector composed with private sector people, politicians, etc. Okay, and just to give you a couple of insights regarding the funding structure, leaders usually ask themselves about what are the main funding sources in my context, how we will generate additional incomes, and how does the think tank organize the fundraising function. And we found different schemes and some similarities. In most of the cases we analyzed, we found a strong dependence on international cooperation funds, scarce government support, and difficulties in engaging the private sector. Most of our cases present a combination of core funding with project-based modalities, and some of them have tried to develop alternative sources of funding, like having their own publishing company, like EPB has in Peru. Some of them are linked to a private organization, so they are like the research unit of a private organization. And in terms of, some of them try to generate also endowments. And in terms of how do they organize the fundraising function, you usually have more centralized schemes or more decentralized schemes that you give incentives to different researchers to bring projects. So this is regarding these dimensions.
And the other dimension that we have to look at is that leadership, staffing, management, and also communication, which is also relates to the work of the groups. And in leadership, some questions that we ask is related to skills of the director, the role of funders, how does leader relate to members, etc. And regarding the different skills, we found like variety. So and then also the variety of the founder. So I think in the case of the 3 cases in South America and then also Indonesia, we found that by doubling or tripling roles, the founders is also the board of the member of the boards and also the senior researchers. But that's kind of creating like the level of decentralization, because you have someone which is senior, so that the role of like the director is not kind of micromanaging of is having a very micro things, but because you have somebody who was also the director, who was also the partner, so it's kind of you have somebody that you share leadership with others, and you don't feel that if the director not really micromanaging, it doesn't mean that the values or the core mission of the organization will not achieve something like that. And horizontal and hierarchical. In the case of Indonesia, some is more like how to say more hierarchical. I mean that you cannot access in the collegial manners, but in other cases you even freely make jokes or texting while also talking about the projects or the policy that we have, and that's also like context. I mean, some of the think tanks are NGO based, so maybe the cultural organization really fits with the kind of leadership that you try to develop. And transition, the other interesting things is that in almost the case, in 6 cases, so it is hardly, to bring someone into the leadership decision. So it's always like from your internal organization that becomes the director or even executive position. And the argument is I mean, mostly it is because the organization want to secure the mission or the values, and sometimes if you think somebody on the external, maybe you have people with good at managerial, good at fundraising, but there is a fear that this external person will not as good as from the internal in terms of safeguarding the values or the mission of the organization. And in terms of the staffing, the question that we ask is about how the think tank seek for the staff, how they attract, retain, and motivate, and what are the typical contractual arrangements. So in terms of the recruitment, think tanks in Indonesia, the 6 think tanks that we look at in Indonesia is they not applying like open recruitment, so it's more based on internship or based on so once they try to make open recruitment and then they feel it doesn't really work because the point is the model that they choose is try to bring fresh graduates, for instance, and then they try to teach them about the values of organization. And then that's the way they feel it is more comfortable rather than being somebody in the middle of career or somebody that totally not knowing the organization better. Some cases it is related to the flexibility. So the flexibility it's the kind of the organization developed to maintain the potential visitors, because some think tanks they are the member or the staff is also working for the organization, but they don't want to lose their potential staff, so they create like full-time, part-time based on the number of hours. And like in the case, one of the cases, because the think tank want to maintain relatively small teams of the permanent staff, they try to make them more contractual and more outsourcing, just to maintain their relatively small overhead. And the financial management, some think tanks outsource its financial plan, related also how the organization invests and try to do development. But some other think tanks just use the meeting within the organization with the founders, with the visitors, to think how they manage the money. But mostly what we found is almost all think tanks try to make good plan in their financial, make good accounting by creating saving schemes, and also try to have acceptable in their budget. So overhead, in the project usually they try to reduce the overheads, but in terms of the total budget, they spend almost like 70% for the visitors. So this is the way they try to also maintain their assets, which is the visitors. And communications. So 16 things try to target different audiences and try to diversify the kind of product of communications. And also regarding the who do the communication, some of the things maybe has this like special division under certain managers of communication. And even though in terms of the quality of the website, but it's something, I mean, as far as we observe, they try to make their website easier. That's, for instance, how to access policy brief, how to access research report, or just how to access like events, but they, you know, in terms of different audiences, they try to diversify. So okay, for policymakers, it's like policy dialogue, promoting things, and with policy brief or policy memo, it's shorter and easy to get the main point of the reports. But for like NGOs or other researchers or other think tanks, mainly like research reports or working papers. So they, regardless whether it is in the perspective of communication, it is good or not, but they have tried to modify and diversify to that second or space in audiences.
Okay. So can I clarify one thing, because it's a difference from 2 days ago. 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
So what I'm getting from this is you're saying there are these 6 organizations in different contexts. They are very different organizations, and you're identifying a number of questions that these think tanks, through the case studies, have asked themselves about their business models. They all have a common objective of sustainability of the organization. And in some cases, regardless of these differences of the organization and the context, they seem to agree on the answer to the question. So these are things that maybe, regardless of context, they're common, you should do, it's okay. And then there are other things where there are lots of options, lots of answers to the same question, where context clearly will play a much bigger role in defining. Is that?
Yes, that's the main idea. To see how much variation we see in these cases, and considering their different contexts. So yes, we have dimensions. We have some typical questions of dilemmas for each dimension, and we have different or similar answers in terms of business models decisions. So with all this information, what we will produce in the next weeks is a synthesis paper that document systematize all the menu of options for these dimensions. You always considering the context and how this decision contributes to the think tank sustainability. Okay, so important to clarify is that we are not, the case studies and the statistics are not an assessment on the different think tanks' business models. It's more a description and analysis of common questions and common decisions on the different dimensions. So the idea is that we will, our intended contribution is to give think tanks a way or an approach to reflect on their sustainability and the key decisions they need to make for in that sense. And the advantages or we found in applying this approach is that it's a very comprehensive overview of the organization and help the staff and the leaders and to see the organization in a very comprehensive way. That is, you don't if you want it to be sustainable, you not only need to be worried about the funding structure, or where from where do you raise your funds, but also what about the staff, what about the activities you are delivering, what about the financial processes, whatever. But we also found that 14 countries, some dimensions are more important than others. Basically, or typically, they are much more worried about funding sources than, for instance, having a sustainable staff. Well, so that's a challenge for our approach in terms of showing that there are the funding sources are connected with much more other dimensions. Another finding of our research is that think tanks do not understand the same but business model, so it's a challenge for the research community or the practitioners and the donors in the field to try to create, get to an agreement on what should we understand by business model. Because if you ask the think tanker, okay, what's your organization business model? How did your organization business model change over time? The door to the way from where they approach the issue is very different. Some of them start with activities, some of them start with funding sources, some of them start with the audiences, or whatever. Okay, and we also found that one of the value contribution of this reflection is that, yes, it is a reflexive process for the thinker. So many of them acknowledge that thinking about these different dimensions help them put the organization in perspective and to understand how the present based on the past and what they expect for the future.
So the first point is, I think, more Leandro, because he has been working for like 2 years. But I agree that the time zone was a challenge, and especially in the end period of the project. And commitment to team to visit, yes. And I think it's more or 1 week. So let's when there is changes with my job, so it requires more commitment to work on, because some of the new job that I have and less time that maybe I can spend on this project. But finally, I think we have been succeeded to always have conversation, conference, and through Skype and so on. You can add something.
No, yes, an important issue for my experience that we usually need an external view. In this sense, it was Stephen or Ike, but we can talk about a peer review, just an external person that can tell us, okay, why don't you think about this, why don't you think about that, and this is very important. It was very important for our project. Okay, I think that's the most important points in terms of collaboration. We also intended to hold regular meetings just to clarify some points or some issues in which we were struggling. Okay, we used different tools, online tools to be connected, also considering our different time zones. So sometimes we need some real-time conversations. So we use different tools, technologies. Yes.
Which sense did the external consultant had more flexibility than?
Yeah, it's not, maybe it's not so related to collaboration, or maybe yes, because
So you had more flexibility than the think tank researcher, which is high.
Yes. It's very common sense.
But time flexibility, topic flexibility.
No, that's why this is many. More time flexibility. I mean, it's okay. Harry was very consumed with
Working with two offices.
family, and whatever. No, I found more flexibility to take care of different things in different periods. So that's not an important issue. So I think that's all in terms of our process. Next steps. So we'll finish our case studies. We'll finishing compare our findings. We'll draft this synthesis paper. We expect to share these findings in Jakarta with the think tank community. We would really like to continue working on this issue, involving new regions, new case studies, refining the approach, because please consider this is like an explorative research and explorative approach to the issue of business models. We thought about adding more quantitative information, not quantitative information, but to broaden the scope of the information we get by sending a sort of survey for think tankers on this issue. Well, that's some of our ideas for the future. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Liana?
I wanted to say that I find really interesting what you I think that the business model approach is an interesting way of seeing organizations more in an integrated way. And I am wondering if you had conversations or thoughts on how maybe dimensions related to each other, like you found, for instance, that there were several think tanks that were organizing these kind of way for their governance, and you also found that they have these kinds of approach to funding, something like that. Because I think it would be really interesting to have, when you were talking about the dimensions and the finding, it reminded me of these self-assessments that you do answering different questions, and then you see yourself either in a spectrum of your, hierarchical or horizontal and blah, blah, blah. And you could have ideas of, after you fill this survey and you realize that you're very hierarchical, it will give you feedback on what you have to pay attention. So you're very horizontal, so you just have to be aware that these may hinder these other dimensions or have an impact on how you do things on these processes and stuff like that. So I think you have a lot of information that could be useful to analyzing relations between dimensions and identifying tips that you can give back to the different typologies or creating even typologies of think tanks according to the business model.
Yeah, but I will answer that from the Indonesian cases. So in Indonesia, there is like almost common. So for instance, KK led organization for 10 years, and then this is his final term, and then he left the organization and set up new organizations. So many NGOs or think tanks in Indonesia looks like that. And that's becomes a problem because the organization is not sustainable because all the modernity networks and mental skills and everything, including business modernity, go with it. And in the ERA case, for instance, having like person with double or triple function is beneficial because you kind of tie this person. So for instance, after 10 years of being director, and then the board says, okay, now you are the part of the board. So it's the way to tie potential person so that it can be with the organization and the organization becomes sustainable. But yes, we didn't look at the relation among dimensions, but we found since some of the recent think tanks are prone to conflict, when the member of the board is dominating by the in-house or that will also impact the sustainability, not only because this person has different expertise, has different networks, but also maybe it can mediate the conflict risk. And I have some comments, but I forget. I will come back to you.
Yeah. I would say that I think what you're saying is right. I mean, I think that's the idea, so to connect all the dimensions, which might create a extremely complex map because you can always come up with connections. But
it felt like a personality test when I was thinking about it when you answer different things and the end says, well, you are very strict or very conservative on these things and your personality is type A or something like that. And it gives you an idea of how you act in certain situations and what you have to take care of.
So, but I wonder, point of view, which would be looking at all the options. But you, in your cases, you do have examples where you might say, for instance, all think tanks, all the 6 think tanks depend on foreign funding. That's a given, right? So your funding structure is almost the same for all. Not the detail of how you actually use the money. That has an effect on all of them in different ways, right? So you could look at how one thing that is set, it's a constant, affects other dimensions of the business model. So as a way of showing that it's all connected.
Yes, no, and that the cases show us that these dimensions are they should be connected because you say, okay, certain think tank wants to concentrate more in policymakers than in civil society organization has been doing. So they say, okay, we need to bring to the board this type of profiles. What about our director? Should it be a peer researcher? Should it be people with more political skills? And also, for instance, we found that typically think tanks that has a core funding can explore more, or can be more innovative or test different models in terms of communications, or you can have a person dedicated to communication issues, while maybe if you don't have that core funding, you cannot. So the idea is to provide like an approach to say, okay, I want to go there in terms of sustainability, but how are the other dimensions contribute or are aligned to promote this long or mid-term horizon? That's just
I have a similar comment like Adriana said. First, I think it's great how you set the information now because you can take much more value of what you already have because you have saved 6 very interesting cases. You don't need like the other approach. It's good enough like this. I was thinking about the 8 dimensions you analyze. Probably the funding structure and the governance are like the core ones. And I don't know if you have something like, no, it's more important this or this, any hierarchy among the dimensions. And also how to relate. And also I have a specific one about funding structure because you mentioned most of the institution has like for funding and project base. But I can imagine that the project base has like overheads or something like that that sustain the whole. And I'm curious about that. How is that organized? Because when I was on that decisions, you have to make like somehow that you promote. It depends. It's also a decision making. If you promote small, bigger projects or intermediate projects, and also I think all the funding structure is really influencing the whole organization. Because, for example, IEP, we survive with this flexible model, but it's really difficult to do research on that model. I don't know if you are like making those questions because one is there's stability. Yes, okay. We are alive. We are alive. Okay, but how we are alive and how it's doing research on that context where you have all the churches projects all the time, and sometimes you don't have enough because the projects are really short, and then you have to spend all your own time and without money to publish it. There's some implications on that sustainability. I mean, I don't know if you have some information about that on your case.
Well, just want to say that it's beyond our objective to say what are the decisions that do the sustainability of the organization. Rather than that, we are trying to see, okay, if we work in this context, what kind of decisions humans usually make. But we have found, for instance, eRay, that they are very concentrated on trying to work on long-term projects rather than short-term projects.
So related to the funding structure and how it is related to like the labor ecosystem. So, but in the case of IEP, for instance, it has maybe like other countries, developing countries, the culture of philanthropy in terms of how philanthropy of each person provide funding for research is very low, and also the government contracts, it is also difficult to acquire. And other thing, because it is of independence, because you don't want to see the external actors see yourself to be controlled because we lose funding from the government. And especially we are in the democratic transition, so in the past the government is so strong and control everything. And if you receive money, it inside you lose some degree of your credibility. And with that context, it is critical to not to rely on general agency. While on the other hand, it also try to diversify. At a glance, it seems there is no relations to the strengthening the value proposition and also the core activities. But at the end of the day, we realize that it actually serves the value proposition. So, for instance, the core activities is research, and the value proposition is this research that related to culture. So, for instance, if the agency want have like a project which contains research and also advocacy, they will work with ELE, not with the SMEL, which is pure research, for instance. And related to the diversified funding structure, because the other organizations see that they very expertise in certain issue, and when journalists try to do like capacity building or trainings or technical assistance, even though the portion of the money is relatively small and it is directly not the core activities, but it serves the values, because if you do research on certain topics and then you are asked to do capacity building or technical assistance which is related to your topics, it provides you like another channel to secure your mission. So let's say you have your policy adopted, and then you want to make sure that the implementation of the policy, and that comes with another work or another job, technical assistance, which is you monitor, you secure the implementation. So I think that's related to Adriana how different aspect actually relates, even though at the beginning the intents not really
Warren? I mean, you provide a lot of trees, I mean, a lot of different animals, but sometimes I think it's good to see the forest. And this is where I see a lot of think tanks not exploring. Is there any other pasture? Is there any other forest? Is there any other source of income? And I refer now to the very general global context where information and analysis more and more becomes a commodity. You know, people, as you know, with using your phones and stuff, you expect the information and the analysis to come free of charge. I mean, I think it's unfair, but this is the expectation. This is what we got used to. Now, to me, that actually poses a very important question, not only as a donor, but as well, actually more as a sort of a researcher. Are there any supplementary funding streams? Are there any models that are out there that actually help the business of running a think tank? So, you know, we know that in the black boxes behind all these gadgets that we use, Google makes billions with clicks, with commercials and whatnot. And because we still operate in the 20th century business models, we don't know how this is done. But in principle, commodity, like the information, gets the money through that kind of. Now, I'm not saying that you should put it in your model, but I just say, like, is there any opening where you can see that forest and you really think about it? The second issue has to do more with human resource, because unlike any other type of organization, the human index is the most valuable and the most expensive, because their time is the most expensive. And now the question is, when you think about business model, because you're very intensive on the human resource, is what could be done in order to make you more competitive? And now, again, my comments are, I think you've really mapped it well. My comments are beyond what you mapped. I've seen, for example, think tanks that specialize in recruiting pensioners. But you know, high-profile pensioners. I mean, probably you do it here with the ambassadors. I noticed here that, but you know, a lot of really high-profile people retire relatively young, or they feel relatively young to continue working. So then you get not only the name, you get also something, but for really a fraction of the price, or often just for the direct expenses, because those people will do that in order to keep their gray cells activated, not necessarily to earn money. And so I'm just mentioning this because you will never find this in the business model, in the management books, in business models and so on. But I believe for think tanks being relatively unusual organizations out there, they have to resort to this unusual tactics and strategies. And I would say, if you ever want to do something to build on this, probably would be to think in that direction. My final comment is actually on the book of Ray Strike. I felt sorry, the second edition, I don't know whether you've read it. I had to, actually I read it twice because I was in the reviewing or whatever advisory committee. And I felt the same missing point, that it still got stuck in the sort of the 20th century of thinking about the way how money and work has been organized. And I understand that because think tanks work with governments and officials, some of them are in the 19th century. That they were further back in time. So, but we follow the model. But as donors are drying up and the governments are not stepping in at the domestic terrain, I believe some of the organizations will really need to really look outside of the ordinary in terms of business model.
Just to add a point of what he said, it's true. We used to recruit a lot of retirees, pensionists, but to the debates, because we don't pay to come and participate in all the seminars, workshops, and Rio is very well known to have a very good intelligentsia, because a lot of ambassadors and people retire in Rio. Like in the US, they retire in Miami, people retire here. So we have a very, very good expertise and people who are very well prepared. So they used to participate a lot in the board, in the debates, seminars. Very good.
Stephen?
Yeah, I have some questions of my own, but I'm just following on your point. For a while, it seemed to me that the model, you're quite right to raise the issue of business models, because in some sense, this isn't business models, so in my view. This is strategic planning. It's just called a different thing, and I've never been able to understand the difference between a business model and a strategic plan, really. But what you're talking about is a different business model. It's different revenue sources, different cross-subsidization. Now that's a business model to me. And as I said, one question I had is, do you find it harder or easier to get think tank directors to answer questions about business models or about strategic plans? That's a question. Is this a concept or a label that's useful or gets in the way of thinking about the real issues? Because to some extent, what I think has happened with this business models approach, it was, the first time I encountered it was actually an IDRC workshop it's a TPI workshop back about 5 or 6 years ago. Business models for think tanks. Well, it's interesting, I'd never seen that before. And I went along and listened. And what it seemed to me, it was, my cynical interpretation was that it was, by saying business models, it made everybody happy to think that you were financially self-sufficient. That you had a business model, you had a revenue stream, you were selling something, you were covering your costs, and you would live happily ever after. That makes donors tremendously happy. And it sounds hard-headed and shrewd and tough and business-like and all those great things. But actually, when you talk about business models, and your discussion is a good example, perfect example, you're actually talking about strategic planning. And in the end, I think what you come back to is balanced scorecard or something like that. That it's not just about revenue sources, it's about human resources and these other things that go into kind of more nuanced strategic planning. And I wonder whether you've sort of come full circle back to kind of proper strategic planning without actually getting to the issue that Goran mentioned, which is, are there other business models? Now, these other business models are generally about cross-subsidization, right? Or free labor. And free labor is interns or pensioners. And as a pensioner, okay, I'm happy to work for free now and then. Maybe a limit to how much of that you're going to squeeze out. The other stuff is cross-subsidization, you know. Who makes money in the internet? There, as an abstract question, that's hard to understand. But the one other sector which is under that pressure, of course, is the journalism, the media. And the interesting thing is, what I think is happening is that nonprofits and think tanks and media, traditional media, have sort of become more like one another. Think tanks are more into media, being a source of media, podcasts, videos. They become more like the media, and the media, in some sense, because they're not making money anymore, have become
media is think tank.
Yeah.
Foreign policy is think tank.
Yeah.
Foreign affairs is think tank.
So somehow the sort of things that are going on in the journalism world, and they're often failing newspapers are supported by foundations to keep them alive, or by Amazon, by Washington Post. If you were really looking for business models, new business models for think tanks, maybe you need to be looking at this other sector, which to me is about as close as you can get to think tanks.
And successful newspapers, like The Economist, for example, are probably even one step beyond think tanks, because they're actually a consultancy arm that occasionally does as a think tank. But because of the production cycle. Sorry, I have to not. There's one more thing, and I know it will make your life, not your life more complex, but the discussion more complex. It's always complex. There's a great ideological issue here, which we all turn a blind eye. And this is very much motivated by the debate on inequality, which shapes, in many ways, most of the debates in the world today, both at national level and at international level. And think tanks are at the moment on the wrong side of that debate, because they're considered to be parts of the elites. In most of the places, elites are those who are, they're not losing, they have the money, but they're losing the public support. And when you think about actually business model, think tank and membership and constituency doesn't come immediately to mind, but I think it's very important to consider it as a campaigns already now in the developed extent. Being alienated of the rest of the system, being alienated of the population. So they're nothing different than consultancies. And I think that's an issue. When you talk business model, it's not only about the technical side, it's also about the ideological side. Who, in a way, whom do you represent? Because in this world, which most of it's making is populist, to say I represent the failed ideological platform of neoliberalism, where expertise is considered to be a sort of an independent position, it's no longer viable. It's gone. I mean, 90s, 2000s, that was okay, because that was the fashion. Everybody said, okay, you're an expert, so you're fine. You're allowed to be neutral. I think today it's very hard to stay on that platform in most countries in the world.
Lots to think about. Yeah, jump into the
No, come on. So you didn't promise that you will cover everything.
So probably not official. We have time to.
Yeah, we have the afternoon to discuss and to continue discussing. Anybody else? Do you have any?
Just one. I mean, very quickly. We're all probably tired, but perhaps it would be interesting. It's a small sample of think tanks, but just to see when and why changes to the dimensions of business models you find it happen. I imagine it will be very, very unusual that many of them change at some point, so maybe some change along the way, but why? And I'm thinking again of interventions such as the Think Tank Initiative. I suspect that those interventions were caused changes in some of these dimensions because it was part of the design of the initiatives, or facilitated or encouraged. Yes. But in thinking about strategic planning, I found that most of the institutions that I work with in Latin America did not do strategic planning as something regular. Most of them did it once when they found the institution, and then they just forgot. So when the think tank initiative suggested they do this regularly, they began to do it. So much more difficult to have them think about restructuring the model in terms that Stephen just pointed out. So it would be interesting to just see what causes change and why, when it happens in the life cycle of an institution.
Well, let me start with this. Most of the changes in different dimensions, what is the context? So typically, new government, yeah, and Google Power is a good example. Typically, new government administration in power, change the way in which it relates to society, the public education in terms of normatives and whatever. So the think tank need to reinvent itself to survive in a context by, I don't know, we are not allowed to work with the national government, we might need to work with local governments, we might need to go to the regional level like so most of the changes have to do with okay. Regarding what other funding sources are there, well, I think that Ike is one of the people in the world that's trying to start a discussion on what other sources can be around there, and the issue of crowdfunding is a thing to test, linked also to philanthropy. I was a couple of weeks ago. I used to work on a think tank, in Argentina, and they told me that one of the guys in the administration team started to play with the money in the financial market, and that actually gave CPEC a lot of revenues. So he was, they make him director of the administration team. So that's another. I don't think that macro think tanks are used to explore that market, but on the other hand, I just don't know.
Some have to lose money too.
Sorry?
Some have to lose money too on that.
Yes.
Our business.
So that's another funding source, but it's not related to the think tanks for business. There is policy research, but okay, it has to do how to make decisions there. But I really don't. I'm not aware of other different sources of funding out there. I think that local support is one of the main challenges. I have been trying to promote strategy to approach the private sector with fundraising events, with different strategies, but it's still a challenge. There are other funding sources out there we need to explore. And regarding staffing, well, I actually see some think tanks making decisions on staffing, saying where we want to concentrate. We want to concentrate in young people, we want to concentrate in senior people. I really see organizations making decisions on that field, and with well explanations on why we should concentrate on young people, why we should concentrate in senior people. So I think that's an issue that they are paying attention to.
Regarding the human resource, so the organization that I've been working is founded by professors and university directors. And I think that's the ideal why hiring interns, why hiring students. The way they secure the overhead, because you hire like internship for like 3 months, and then maybe you give like more longer contract, like 1 year, and then you evaluate, and then okay, this is the guy that we need something like that. So it really responds to the context, and I think it's in some way equals to the view where you are with her. Yeah. What else? Related to how thinking changes. I remember I talked to Antonio about this theory. I mean, at the very initial transition of the environmental transition, it focused more on the civil society. I mean, strengthening the youth organizations, strengthening the NGOs organizations so that it can be more influential in the new open and democratic processes. But after like 10 years, and the organizations see that the policymakers is more open, and then also the internal organizations, because the students that we recruit, perceive themselves like their seniors who are university directors. I myself experiencing that. So as I got bachelor and master, and I have like imagination of being like lecturers, and I know that that's the like the values that you create in the younger generation, and that's also the changes in the external, which is more democratic, and also the internal, where people gaining more degree, and that affect the organization to shift the focus from the community organization, from serving the civil society organization, to put focus more on the policy groups. Because now you have staff with MA, with PhD, and it is hard to make that people work to organize community, for instance, because they want to work on the desk and engaging policy dialogue with policy makers and like that. So that's the way how organization evolves and responds to the changes within and outside the external organization.
Okay, cool. I know it's real time, so thank you very much. We've had 3 presentations. You've got good questions, some feedback, and hopefully that'll help you to finish your projects in time. So we're going to take a lunch break, an hour as usual, and then Steve and I will tell you a bit more about our project, our learning through the process. And then you'll have time to continue working on your projects. So until later today, until whatever time you want to work, but this is your time to kind of.
But this afternoon, I think we have this discussion, no?
Yeah, we have our discussion, but then we won't take until 5.
The recording.
So you've got time to do anything else.
Okay, because we have to discuss the future.
Let it take time.
Congratulations, very
Thank you.
Sorry I missed the
No.
president.